A fish finds itself out of water. Option 1, it can't breathe, and it dies. So if you find it hard to believe that I forgot that I'm allergic to horses, then I invite you to know me, or possibly also just talk to someone who does, and they can tell you, you know, sometimes Amy just stops mid-sentence because she forgets that she's, you know, like speaking. And then maybe you'd be like, she sounds great, I would totally be friends with that girl. And then I'd be like, great, that's gonna be awesome, but also, wait, what was I saying about horses? But this is really a story about all the times I didn't talk about it. Like when, to celebrate my friend Brittany's 28th birthday, we found ourselves unwittingly at the dinner theater phenomenon Medieval Times on a PD day. And so the stadium was completely sold out. We had seats way at the back, and it was completely full just of, you know, well, children. And I was taking it all in, the horses, the ponytails, and the surprising fact that Medieval Times is such a progressive institution that that even in this place where you're directed to address the waitstaff as wenches and knaves, that they did have a vegan option. So you can see how I could have been distracted enough not to notice the warning signs, like that tingling feeling that I get in my throat sometimes, and that nasal congestion that suddenly happened, and that I couldn't breathe. And it took me possibly a little bit too long to realize, because I was a little overstimulated by my surroundings. Flashback. 20 years earlier, a young girl is riding a horse for the very first time. You might suspect that it's me because she's not breathing very well. And your suspicions will probably deepen when you see that despite her obvious discomfort, she doesn't tell anyone, and that actually she also goes back for more riding lessons the next day. And also the day after that. And at this point, you're probably just thinking, well, that's just a stupid kid. That kid doesn't deserve oxygen. But then you're going to realize that that accompanying the girl was her best friend, who wouldn't get to go horseback riding if the girl, who might be me, pussed out. And so, well, the girl was me. And when my mom, on the third day, she said, "Do you want to go to the hospital?" I respectfully declined, because to me at the time, the hospital was a place that you go only in the most dire circumstances, like when you're getting your uterus removed. And I thought that I would get there and the doctor would see my intact uterus and just be like, you know, you're wasting your time, kid, go away. But eventually, it got to this point where I could only take these tiny little sips of air. I don't know, Amika, it wasn't that funny. I could only take these tiny little sips of air, so my mom did eventually drive me to the hospital. And they did hook me up to this machine, which was, I felt, a promising start. And as I was inhaling these steroids, they used to calm the inflammation in my lungs, the doctor said, you know, your daughter has asthma and it's pretty common and it's okay, but good job bringing her to the hospital. Because actually just a week ago, a mother was bringing her daughter about the same age to this hospital because she was having an asthma attack. And instead of getting to wear the cool mask and being hooked up to the machine, she like died on the way. And my mom, even though my mom was pretty, you know, relieved that I hadn't just become another horseback riding statistic, I guess I felt like sort of validated, and but I also was really, really disappointed to find out that I was one of those people for whom puppies and kittens were an existential threat, because I was an animal lover. And to me, it was the greatest compliment. This one time when a friend of mine, she said, you know, Amy, you really have a way with animals. And it was right as I was like reaching out to grab this baby raccoon that I was gonna love and treat as my own. But when that didn't work out, my parents got me a hypoallergenic dog. But in a cruel twist of fate, Buddy, my poodle, he died prematurely of a congenital lung malformation. And actually only a couple years after I was diagnosed as asthmatic, I begged my parents to send me to horseback riding sleepaway camp. And so I went. And I was armed with my 2 inhalers, my cortisone cream and Visine, and a disciplined attitude of mind over matter. So my first letter home would read, well, I'm still allergic to horses. A fish finds itself out of water. Option 2, it evolves. I'll admit that it is redundant for someone who suffers from an immune disorder. It's redundant for someone who suffers from a disorder of the immune system to have an epiphany about how sometimes she can be her own worst enemy. But it's going to be actually a long time before I have that realization, because only 3 months after the events of Brittany's birthday, we went to another more sophisticated horse show, Cavalia. And after using my inhalers 3 times during the show to little effect, Brittany asked me point blank, are you gonna die? And I said no, which was pretty much a lie. And but when we were at Medieval Times before, she had no idea actually what was going on. I didn't say a word because I have known Brittany for many years, and I knew that she would try and make me leave, and I knew that she would be successful because Brittany is she's a lot louder than I am, and even though I couldn't breathe, it was more important to me that I didn't lose. Because I, Amy of suburbia, stubborn of will and tender of ego, will thwart any plans to that involve people having fun without me. So I stuck it out, suffering quietly for 3 hours until the Black Knight took the win and the games were over. But then they weren't over, because at Medieval Times there's only one exit. And between us and it were just aisles packed full of sticky children who were losing their mittens, and all the while I'm losing my grip on this earthly experience. So Brittany and I were shuffling towards the door, and I casually mention that I've been having an asthma attack for the past 3 hours, and that this barricade of children was going to be the death of me. So she grabbed my wrist and said, "Amy, this is not the time to be polite." And in a show of love and loyalty, she dragged me across the room, trampling the tiny hands and feet. They were beneath us. But still, we barely moved because it was so packed. So I look around, and I'm like, it's got to be some obvious symbolism. Standing in a stadium full of children who are stepping one foot in front of the other, learning slowly with each step and each misstep. And it occurs to me that this whole thing would just go a whole lot faster if the parents would pick up their children and actually just carry them out of the building. But they didn't do that. And luckily, Medieval Times is well equipped with many emergency exits. Each one is naved or wenched with a kind of gatekeeper who directs you towards the gift shop. And Brittany singles out the weakest looking wench, and she insists that she let us through this emergency exit. And she says, "Please, I beg of you, my friend is asthmatic, she is allergic to horses, and yet she made some decision to come to this jousting tournament. And since she clearly can't take care of herself, I find myself feeling responsible for her well-being, and I want to make sure that she doesn't die, especially not at Medieval Times. So if you could please let us use this emergency exit, because this right here, it's an emergency." And the wench looks at me thoughtfully, and she puts an understanding hand on my shoulder, and it's as if she's almost staging a one-woman intervention, because when she uses her other hand to point to the emergency exit that I was so desperate to use, she says, "That way leads to way more horses." And isn't that always the case? To finish, I'd like to borrow some words from a cowboy and say to all the horses and furry creatures of this world, I just wish I knew how to quit you.